Hello there. I hope you're doing well today. My name is Dr. Kathryn Garforth, and today I have the pleasure of talking to Dr. Jennifer Buckingham. Today we're going to be speaking about orthographic mapping. And I think the next thing to talk about is the difference between what has been traditionally called a sight word or one that someone has memorized just on its shape versus a word that is orthographically mapped. Because I see in many classrooms, teachers sending home sight word lists, send home the Dolch sight words and expect kids to memorize them. And if we talk about why that's not the best approach and how memorizing a word is different from actually mapping it orthographically in your brain.
Yeah, I mean, sight word is a term that's often used as a way of describing a particular teaching method, and it's often used in the sense of, as you say, sending home long list of words that children are supposed to memorize, just the way that that word just looks and its visual properties, not thinking about the phonemic properties that it has. Or anything else about that word. So you can learn a certain number of words in that way, but it's not efficient. So there's no transfer that can go from that. There are lots of words that are visually similar. So if you're thinking about, word boxes, a tall word, two short words, a tall word, that could be how many different words. So if you were trying to learn look by the shape of the word, then of course that can be book as well as the same shape. So there's no specificity to it, and there's no generalization. So it doesn't really meet either of the things that you want a child to have when they are learning a particular word. Having said that, it's sometimes useful to learn a very small number of words just, instantly on sight, things that don't necessarily fit well into the phonic scope and sequence, but that are really useful words that are high frequency, which means they occur often when reading connected text. So a word like the, it's really useful just to know the word the. And that doesn't mean that you don't attend to the properties of that word and, just present it and, don't think about it at all. But the word the is probably going to, if as a decodable word, be well down the phonic scope and sequence if you're talking about a systematic introduction of graphemes and phonemes. So it's useful to learn a small number of words in that way as sight words, but to try to learn all of them and expect children to be able to transfer their ability to read new words based on learning old words just by the visual properties, then it's not going to work. It's not efficient at all. And it doesn't lead to that orthographic mapping.
Yeah, and so once they've mapped a word to their brain, then they can recognize it in different settings, different fonts, different contexts, and they don't have to just think of those word boxes or letter boxes to make sure that they make sense. And another way that or another thing for us to highlight is that it's important when we're doing reading instruction that we also pair it up with the spelling instruction. And we talked about some spelling tests or, memorizing spelling words, but it's also important that we send home these spelling lists for our students. It's better to have them on, a related concept or spelling pattern as opposed to random words taken out from your curriculum or what you're focusing on that week. We're not saying that those aren't important words for the kids to learn how to recognize, but when you're doing an exercise like a spelling test, you're trying to teach the relationships. So if you have them related and focused, you're going to have more success and a higher probability that they're going to recall them the following week.
Absolutely. And our brains like patterns. Mm-hmm. So when you're devising spelling lists, children can see the patterns in the way that things are spelled and pronounced. And also, again, I think we'll come back to this later, also some attachment then to the meaning. If you start looking at morphological analysis, then those patterns start to come together in what we think of, or what's been described as the self-teaching hypothesis. So once those patterns are established, children are much more likely to be able to transfer that into reading unfamiliar words. They self-teach. They're like, okay, I've seen a word that looks like this before, and it sounded like this, and it's related to this meaning, and that helps then with that generalization and transfer. And the other reason to have spelling lists that are really carefully constructed is that our brain needs repetition to learn. So that's the other factor, is repetition. Practice leads to learning, and leads to things being stored in long-term memory. So lists of random unrelated words, either in their phonological properties or in their meaning. I've often seen spelling lists constructed around a theme. And sometimes that can be helpful, but more around vocabulary, actually. That's a better way to think about if you've got a theme-based approach and you are working on a particular topic, let's say it's space in class, then to have a list of words that you work on the vocabulary of that word, plus look at the spelling, then, that obviously is going to be really useful for reading comprehension. But in terms of actually learning to spell words and in a way that helps you to be able to spell unfamiliar words, but also to be able to spell in a relatively fluent automatic way, which leads to better writing, then it's really important to focus on that, the orthographic mapping component, which relies on those grapheme phoneme correspondences.
Right.